Today we are going to elaborate in the second part of, the Art of Sound Designers that we started last year, and we're going to release this on a videos, part 1 and part 2. And how, this is one of the questions that towards the years is valid to us, like how the advances on analog and digital technologies has impacted your art. In particular, there are hybrid synthesizers that they are using analog and digital technologies that they appear on the scenes, opening a new soundscape. So how do you feel about these advances and how has impacted your art? Anyone?
I would just say that, first off, it was a real joy to see the name Sequential Circuits return to Dave Smith.
Yeah.
And secondly, I would like to say that if anyone knows anything about blurring those two lines, it would be Dave. And if you've looked at any of the Prophet series, there's just a beauty to providing analog filters with digital generated waveforms. So it's, to me, it's very exciting because you get the best of both worlds. You get stability and you also get warmth. So I love it. I'm also watching, even in the company I've done a lot of work with, Kurzweil now, they've added FM, thanks to John Chowning out there. God bless you. Added FM to their vast architecture, which is, again, blurring the lines between multiple forms of synthesis. So to me, it's a very exciting time. And what it offers us, again, is this continual drive to see what else can we make that hasn't been heard yet. So that's my response. Thank you.
I'm not exactly sure what a hybrid means, because it could mean a lot of different things, but it's, to me, my personal take on it is that it's combining technologies. Taking the best features of analog technologies and digital technologies, it combines it into a flexible system. They could be used individually or independently, or they can be combined in unique and unusual ways, which it's a doorway that opens the possibilities. It's just, you know, think about it like math and multiplication. The possibilities of combining different technologies of analog and digital or modeling, it presents a new highway for us to create sounds and go places that haven't been to boldly go, where no person or musician has gone before. I think that's an exciting avenue. You know, sometimes we want to recreate sounds that exist. Other times we do want to forge new frontiers and cross boundaries to create something that no one has heard before. I think we, as programmers and sound developers, we often surprise ourselves, but we take tremendous joy and pride in surprising others. When we see the reaction of people, then it makes us feel gratified and good about what we do, that we're actually connecting with people and inspiring people and getting them to use new sounds in new ways.
Well, I would say that in many ways, because when I always remember when I was a kid, I always liked to be a composer, and the tools that the synths offered were really, really amazing, were like a dream to me. I'm more a sampling guy, not too much into synth world. So my approach is more into sampling, into reproducing the sounds that already exist. But, well, the advance in digital technology has been so huge that in so few years that it's really unbelievable. You know, when I think about 20 years ago or 10 years ago, it's so many things that we can do now, they were impossible. I'm so happy to be able to live this era, because we can do so many things almost endless in terms of sound, reproducing the already existing instruments, making new sounds out of them. So, well, it's a dream for sound designers, and I think it's also a dream for composers, because it's endless what the new sounds can offer you, how they can inspire you.
Yeah, we're living in interesting times. I love finding new ways to explore sound. And whatever the tool is, what's fun is developers are creating plugins and synthesizers that are marrying all sorts of different things. I just released a library where the goal was to make Omnisphere sound bad, which is actually kind of hard because everything is so pristine, but you can use the sample rate and bit resolution and put random LFOs that are going really fast and use distortion, and there's some really cool tricks with using a filter to only distort just the higher frequencies. Those types of things allow you to find new sounds from sounds that turn them off and it's, oh, that's just a pad. But you put these things back on and it's like, oh my God, what the heck is that, you know? So that merging and the ability to manipulate things and use filters in ways that maybe you hadn't thought of using them in the past is really exciting. So on to the future, right?
Yeah. Sounds like quantum physics to me. One of the things that I denote about all of this, when we talk about hybrids, I think about cars now, and taking technologies and being able to marry them together. I think about the human voice, though, a lot. And the human voice, I think, gives us an idea of how we can take our voices and with technology be able to come up with these new sounds. I think we're thinking about that when we take these technologies and put them together. So when you think about making a voice or a sound, most of the time you're thinking about something that's already innately in you, and by some accident of turning a knob here, there, and it speaks back to you. There's a biofeedback type of thing. And I think having all of these tools, like the hybrid would encompass, gives us a new palette. A new palette. I remember the beginning of the analog days with the Moog and the ARP and all of those, and being confounded with the fact that we couldn't shake it the way we wanted it to. And then the digital came out, and then we started to mess with that. So to me, it's just another way to bring us together in all of these technologies. Not saying that one is better than the other, but it brings us all together in the fact of being able to say, I can take a little bit of this. It's like being in the kitchen. I don't ever cook with a recipe. I just go around and I sort of sniff and find out what the ingredients are, you know, thyme and oregano, and sniff around. And finally I find this combination. I think it might work in this recipe, and it's the same way with the technologies.
Yeah, at the beginning we have only the analog stuff, and later comes the first digital synthesizers like Yamaha DX series or Synclavier, and we combine it over MIDI and make new patches with MIDI. Then there comes the samplers, but now we have it all in one workstation or in different instruments, and have the hybrid technology in one instrument and can merge the best engines what you want, you know.
Yeah. You have an extensive career. You have done using so many platforms for creating and designing your sounds. You have worked on software, analog, synthesizers, digital, all kinds of generations. What would you say that is your favorite platform for sound design, and why?
I have a problem with the word favorite because
Yeah.
it's really, many of us are brought into the programming world through a project. We're hired to do something. So at the time, our favorite product might be the one we're working on. But I would say my favorite is an integration between a hardware platform that I know very well, and then combining that with software plugins at this point. I think the best of both worlds. You end up with a compositing capability that you then, in various, as a composer, in various places you can drop sounds in, and you can modify them to fit the actual project you're working on. I get a humorous chuckle sometimes. I'll play a patch in something, especially in a lot of the new plug-in software synthesizers, and I'll think to myself, where would you use that? And then I hear a soundtrack or something that might be applicable to a movie or some kind of a spot, and I think, what would be better than that? So favorite, it's kind of dependent to me on what I'm looking as an outcome when I'm starting to work. And then I'll decide what's my favorite for that application.
Wonderful. Thank you.
For me, it's kind of an easy answer. You know, like Chris, I think projects make us comfortable working in a certain environment. And since 2011, or even before that, in 2010 to, you know, for the past 9 years, I've been largely involved with the development of the Kronos, which has 9 different engines or 9 different ways to work and play. You know, I don't mean play, I mean play, have fun. And so I'm comfortable in that environment, but I still like to, you know, play an acoustic piano. One of the new Korg products that I wasn't involved in is a Voca modular. And it's really, it's fun, it's creative, it's innovative, it's cheap, it's cool. And I was speaking with someone this morning and I said, you know, sometimes the point of what we're doing, you know, when we create, sometimes we want a piece of music or we want to perform a piece of music. Other times, messing around is really just a fun thing that we do it for relaxation and for our own entertainment and edification. So, you know, if it makes you feel good, that's great. If we, as artists, performers, musicians, composers, like to make other people feel good, well, that happens and that's realized through composition and performance. But there's also that aspect of just like, you know what, I just want to relax, I just want to mess around with something and explore and have fun, do something I've never really done before. So I think it's subject to our moods and what we're, you know, what we set aside time for, because it all does take time.
Okay.
Mine's hybrid.
To me, as well, the answer is easy because I love software. You know, it's to me it's the endless platform, no limits at all. You can do whatever you want. You can manipulate the sounds. It's just imagination. Because nowadays, even for sampling, where I mainly do, well, Native Instruments Contact, Best Service Engine, there are lots of different platforms you can go, or you can use. But to manipulate sounds, software is really amazing because you can use so many synthesizers where you can drag and drop your own sounds, manipulate them, do whatever you want. So software to me is the best way, and I really love it. It's a dream. It's a dream.
Platform.
Yeah, my favorite sound design platform is Logic Pro. I've used it since it was on an Atari 520 ST. Way back in the day from another company that didn't have an A.
eMagic.
eMagic. Very hard Langley and all those. I just spent this last summer 2 weeks with my daughter in Costa Rica, and I took a field recorder, and I have these incredible no cars for hundreds of miles around ambiences, and I'm feeding them through all sorts of really cool synth engines in Logic. Like, what can I do to turn this into a mind-blowing pad that's powered by crickets? And doing things like that, you know, it's like, oh, I have an idea, let's try it. You don't have like, there's no limitations on, oh, this only goes that far, or this only goes that far. I mean, you can go way too far real too easily, but it's really fun to be able to explore things, and it's like a playground for your mind. When the key is whatever sequencer or platform you use to work with music, just know it as well as you know driving a car at night with blindfold. I mean, the more you know about your tools, the more comfortable you're going to be being an artist. I have a YouTube channel where my whole goal is teaching people synthesis so that when they turn and look at the interface with synth, they still stay in artist mode. So you don't go into freak out techno mode, you still stay creative. And so if you know your tools, you'll be artistic. Even when you're dealing with artistic related tools, you can not go, oh no, what's cutoff resonance? You know, you'll know what that can do and what that can work for you to do. So.
Well, I concur about Logic Pro. I started also back in eMagic days. And what I like about it is the fact that not only do you have the software aspect, because it has a very sophisticated MIDI interface. There's a part in there that called the environment, where you can go through and route MIDI, transform MIDI any way you want to. And I play a lot of times live. And so I need both the hardware with a couple of manuals here, a couple of keyboards here, and on the floor. And I can route all of those things to Logic and have all of those possibilities happening at one time. So for me, having a DAW that has the capabilities of being software and hardware, external hardware capable, that's a favorite for me.
Amen.
My favorite is Kronos from Korg, yeah. I love the 9 engines. You can combine everything and make a lot of sample libraries for the Kronos. But also I make some sounds for the iOS engines and for the Moog 1. It's a flagship in analog. It depends sometimes on what for company hires me, you know, but mostly Kronos.
You have done an extensive career through your sound design, and you have created patches for artists such as Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder, just to mention a couple of them. You have done sounds that they have been created by being used in soundtracks, and you have been creating libraries that have been used in classical instruments, instruments that they are now part of the history of the sound synthesis and the modern music. Would you mind to share with us what would be like the biggest accomplishments as a sound designer in any of those big projects or platforms?
I would say my biggest accomplishment is making it to NAMM 38 years in a row. Again, these are tough questions. I congratulate you on them. I look at individual things that have occurred in my life. I got a call one day in a panic from Greg Rule. Those former keyboard people out there know Greg Rule, who was working with Foreigner, and they were on a foreign island, and they had been given an instrument that they needed to use for a concert that night, and there are signature sounds. Every major group has signature sounds associated with the hits, if you will, and they needed sounds made, and they needed them like now. And so through the internet and the accomplishments we have in technologies outside of music, I was able to put together some sounds and get them to them in under an hour. So that was an accomplishment, the way I look at it. I work with a big Sinatra group. We do a tribute to Frank Sinatra and trying to transcribe and then replicate, some of these arrangements from Nelson Riddle and other people of that nature. It's a big accomplishment when you finish. Other people go, well, I've seen Elvis impersonators, and that's great. But you put a lot of sweat into making electronics marry to acoustic instruments and make the end result to an audience hear it and think they're hearing a very big band. In fact, we experience that on Broadway every day now. I had to do programming for Whistle Down the Wind, which was for Andrew Lloyd Webber. It was a show going out on a US tour. And they gave me 4 weeks with a score and 6 Yamaha Motif ESs. And I had to transcribe the score so that 4 players, even with 6 instruments, 4 players had to be able to replicate what 30 instruments were doing. So these are challenges. And again, I think, there isn't a biggest one. Each one is kind of a mountain, and when you climb it, you're exhausted. You're thankful to God that you made it through. And as soon as you turn around, there's another one. So that's the way I feel about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly for me, I have a fond memory of the M1 and developing the M1. And I think what was an accomplishment was it was the first time there was an interactive team of people where Japan said, you know what, we need someone from Europe, from the US, get together and forge out an instrument and may the best ideas from everyone involved win. And I was able to put a team together, with Ben Dowling, Peter Schwartz, Robbie Kilgore, and Michele Petrilli, and Athen Bilius. We went to Japan and worked together and collaborated, much like a group. There was a lot of interaction and there was a democratic process. Later, that team was expanded, we added, Skip and John Bowen and I and Ben, we worked on the Wave Station together, and that was another collaborative venture, which was fun, it was passionate. I was proud of the work and the accomplishments that we all achieved with those products and instruments, given the state of technology at that time, which was growing and developing. And many things were being integrated, brought together, digital effects with PCM samples, getting it down to fight and trim weight to fit it in a ROM, wave sequencing combined with vector synthesis, card expansion, all those things came together. But they came together with the coordination of a team, like a band, working together and going on the stage and just getting a really good groove going. So I think that's probably a fond and a big accomplishment for me.
Thanks.
So, well, I have to say that to me, my biggest accomplishment is to make a living from what I really love. So,
that's a good one.
I never dreamed about this when I was a kid. So I'm happy to be making a living of what I love and get up every day being happy. But, well, biggest accomplishment could be when you see some big names or your musical heroes, like, for example, Kitaro or David Arkenstone using my sounds and on their albums and even crediting my name is something that I really love. Makes me extremely happy. Probably the biggest one was when I always loved Michael Cretu, Enigma, who was really was famous because he mixed Gregorian choirs with dance music or techno music. So, well, some years ago I recorded a Gregorian choir, I sampled one, because I always loved that. And, well, I was really surprised because Michael Cretu called me. It was like another musical hero when I was young. Well, those are those moments that make you really happy and think that, well, you are doing things pretty good. So it's like a dream come true.
Gosh, 30 years, you look back, we were fortunate to accomplish a lot of cool things. I mean, it's an honor to, I've been part of the voicing team for all of the Korg wave drums. I remember the first one when the Japanese came to Los Angeles and met in this little tiny room in Canoga Park, and we had talks about the algorithms and trying to match up with what types of acoustic drums and new drums, and then from there to the latest one where I did sampling sessions at the different waterfalls and the oceans and then turned those into actual drum sounds to be, so when you hit the drum harder, it could trigger samples as well as the wave engine. I've done drum loop libraries, and there's video games that use nothing but drum loops that you did because they didn't buy anything else, it seems, for the entire soundtrack. It's like, really? Okay. I mean, doing what you love and being able to make a living and share your joy with others, so hopefully it rubs off, it's just a wonderful life to have. So yeah, many accomplishments.
Oh man, I got to tell you, I think about 50 years ago when I came to NAMM in 1969, that was a big accomplishment. But not only that, the fact that I met the man who has given this industry some of the greatest products, Ikutaro Kakehashi of Roland. And before that, he was president of Acetone. And Acetone was building a rhythm unit at that time. And I had it sitting on top of an X77 Hammond organ for my first presentation in Chicago. And I had changed all the rhythms inside, so I had to go in with a soldering gun and put diodes in where they weren't supposed to be, or at least and Mr. Kakehashi, I call him Mr. K affectionately, was sitting in the audience, and he came up and he said, "Looks like my machine, but doesn't sound like my machine. He says, what did you do? Well, I never traveled then without my toolkit. So I opened it up for him, and we became instant friends. So my accomplishments have been making friends at NAMM. And through that, the Hammond Organ Company in '72 sent me out to see what was going on at Stanford University. They heard about this process called FM. And so I went out, and boy, there was John Chowning with a quadraphonic setup, with his tape, a 4-track tape, playing back his sounds that he had created on the mainframe at Stanford. I heard that first demonstration of FM, and I just went bananas. And I told Hammond engineers, I said, this is the next tone wheel. For Hammond, that was a big deal. Unfortunately, they did not, but fortunately, Yamaha came and utilized and licensed that technology. So here, another friend, lifelong friend.
Yeah.
And using that technology was the way that I got Michael Jackson's ear, the way we produced the sounds, some of the sound designs for Captain EO when they came out. So it is really about those people that were pioneers. And those people are here today. And I would say, if you're going to look at this group of people here, we were all standing on the shoulders of these people who gave, and the engineers, the unsung engineers, and software engineer over there, Dr. Chowning. He's sitting there relaxed, I'm sure. But I want to let him know how much he means to this whole industry. So it's about the people. It's still about the people, and that's why we make the music.
Yeah.
My biggest accomplishment is to make the user of my sounds happy. Yeah. And also I'm very proud that some special musicians, famous musicians and keyboarders use my sounds. Yeah, that's it.
Wonderful. We have time for questions from the audience. I'm pretty sure last time we didn't have this session, so if you have questions, there is an open microphone, and the panel will be happy to respond. Please, go ahead.
Hi, a question for all you guys. What would you tell someone, who has no idea, where to even start? What would you tell them, or how would you direct them where to go, or at least give them a starting point so that they, maybe they have their own ideas, they just don't know where to start or go to?
I think the first thing I would say is to start somewhere. And the place that I would ask you to start really would be to ask yourself what kinds of sounds are interesting to you, and then start down a path of how to learn how to make those sounds, because that'll determine what platform you look at. So analog is a great place to start because you learn about signal flow and control. You learn about the basic building blocks that we've all basically started with, because most of us started with analog technology and then came forward as new technologies were available. So I would pick sounds that you like a lot, and I would look at an analog platform probably to start. A lot of people think Reason is a good platform because it's a software platform, but it allows you to work with a number of different technologies. You can see wiring, how to hook things up. You can see how MIDI is done, basically accomplished. But I would say hardware. I mean, if I was asked personally, I would start with an analog piece of hardware, and I'd familiarize myself with what the controls do.
I'd also say everything that you want to know about anything you want to buy is on YouTube. So if you want to know about a certain form of synthesis or a new product, you can get some reviews are not all that reliable. Some of them are. So watch more than one, because everybody has an opinion, and with YouTube, everybody can share it. But I have over 220 videos, probably 250 now, that are all about we'll start from scratch with a certain synthesizer, and when we're done, we made sounds that you can buy a library that those sounds are in. So watching someone do something will give you a lot of the synapses to like, oh, that's what that's for. And especially if you can find someone that explains why they're doing what they're doing, when they're doing video. You know, I saw The Matrix a long time ago, and when Trinity couldn't fly the helicopter, and she says, Tank, I need to know how to fly this helicopter. And he put a cartridge in, got it. And she takes off flying the helicopter. And so that's what gave me the idea of videos, because once the knowledge is in your mind, you'll know what to do with it. So YouTube is just, the world's putting its brain on YouTube, it seems, and there's so much information on any subject you can think of. So I would start there to at least go, okay, well, do I want analog? Do I want digital? Do I want software? Am I wanting to be a performer? Am I wanting to make sounds that others are going to enjoy? I mean, there's a huge world that equals sound design these days. So get some examples to like feed your mind, and then you can go with a more educated decision.
I'd like to add to that. You touched on it about listening to the things that resonate with you, artists or sounds. I remember the thing that hit me, that got me into the synthesizer world, was Switched on Bach. Walter Carlos, Wendy Carlos had that album, and when I heard that album, I resonated with it. I had no idea that something could be so musical and yet be what we call a synthesizer. And if it resonates with you, then find out who did it. Why did they do it? And then you can start, do a little research on that, and then you'll find out, because you really want to follow your heart. You want to follow your vibe. Even though there's millions of different ideas out there, but the ones that really resonate with you, that's where you want to go and find out how did they do that, and hang on with that, because that's why we're here. We're not here to be like everybody else. We're here to be us, and then we share that with everybody else.
I think we all like different types of food, and with music, there's different styles and genres. I would say, pick some styles or some genres, then be specific. Pick a song, then be even more specific. Pick a sound, and try to analyze that and learn from that. And by doing that with different styles and genres and songs, it gives you an acquired knowledge that's eclectic, that it's not just, well, it might be something based in analog or digital or both, or even in acoustic creation, but it gives you that acquired knowledge that you build up your database that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was doing the Wave Station, and we all came to San Jose, we all had our little sets of sounds that we had spent our time in our studio making, and I really realized and learned then that each person, if you know the instrument, your own voice will come out, and it's very different than the next person next to you. And there's a number of sound designers I respect greatly out there that I know. And everyone that does, the whole goal, find your voice. And whether it's with music or just sounds, everybody has their own voice.
I want to add one more thing, too. I had an opportunity, I had a program for 7 Synthesis. We did a Switched on Bach, because you mentioned it, with Wendy Carlos live. Replication is a key that taught us all up here an awful lot of things. We heard a band, we heard a sound, we wanted to make that sound. So we set out, and each time we accomplished getting the sound where it was 90%, the personalities up here never stop at 90. So it had to get to 100%, and you would learn so much. And then you knew how to make that sound. And then different architectures, you knew how to still make that sound. So everybody is saying the same thing, really, is pick some place to start that speaks to you.
Hi, I was wondering if you guys could share the process of how you got to be able to make money doing this, because I'm sure a lot of us want to do that, and I would love to know how you guys were able to.
I can be very quick because I know time. Everybody wants to say something. I actually started in a band when I was 8 years old, and the technology was transistor organs. I worked for a music store, and at the time, music retail, brick and mortar, was a place you could make money. And I hope it still is for a lot of businesses. Through that, I became a keyboard department manager, so I was responsible for keyboard sales. One of the things that sold keyboards was making libraries. So the first thing we learned how to do is make our own libraries, because you could make some extra money selling your libraries to the people that would buy the hardware. That got me noticed by a manufacturer who hired me, and then I ended up becoming a product manager and developing products like the K2000, K2600. So it's really just starting someplace. You know, maybe you think about, you know, working with a band on a local level, even if it's just to carry their gear. I hate to say it, but I was a studio rat too. I worked in studios where I wasn't paid, but I learned an awful lot. And the knowledge is what people pay for. So after you have a certain amount of knowledge, people are willing to pay you something. So you have to start somewhere.
I've always found bribery and blackmail and threats very effective.
You're not supposed to tell.
I try to intimidate people. No,
hire me or pay.
Knocking on doors, networking. If someone has a successful plan and they're making money, talk to them about their approach. See if you can incorporate part of what they're doing into your scheme, your routine. And I think that probably the best, you know, the simple answer is communication. Communicate with those around us who are already involved and successful, and ask them to share perspective, tips, and tricks, and communicate. Knock on doors. I called Korg because I wanted to hot rod and trick out a Poly 6 in 1983, you know, and add all kinds of things to it. You know, and they thought I was nuts, but they said, all right, come on, and we like nuts. But I knocked on the door, and I was curious, and I didn't give up. I didn't want to take no for an answer. And when all that fails, bribery, threats, and blackmail.
Well, this is really a hard question, because so many things can happen in life. But my only advice would be, at least in my case, is this is really something passionate, about passion. So I always say that the difference between being successful or not is when you don't have a plan B. Is that correct in English? Yeah. I never had a plan B. You know, I just wanted to do this. I didn't care about anything else. I couldn't think of, oh, this is not going to work. I never expected that. And it took me a long time, almost 15 years, to really starting to make money of what I really wanted. So it's just never surrender, and yeah, that's the only advice I can give. Yeah.
Music stores are still, I think, a good place to get a lot. You will learn ins and outs. You'll meet people in the industry. I used to work at a store in Seattle, and Ben Dowling would come up. We would be showing the M1 or the Korg DSS-1 or something. He's like, I've got new sounds for you, and I made sounds for my customers. So I go, I have new sounds for you. He's like, holy shit, you know? And actually, when I joined Korg, the sounds that I'd made at that music store, I sent to Japan, and that ended up getting me the job to do the drum card for the M1, because they're like, okay, can you make combinations and map drums? And so for many, many years, I've been the mapper of drum kits for Korg because of that work that I did early on. You're in a place where there's a billion contacts available, so if you really have a passion for something, talk to people at the different companies and say, I love your plugin, I made some cool sounds, can I send them to you, and maybe we can get going on some sort of a working relationship. Support through patch libraries. There's a lot of people that want new sounds, and if you can get your voice above the noise, and if you have make a YouTube channel and show your sounds and explain why you made them, do things that will get people interested. When I started in 2009, it was really, really small. And it's just grown over time to be a very successful business for me. But it's taken a lot of work, but you have to start. So I think the biggest step is putting your foot forward and saying, I'm doing this, and going from there.
Got another question?
We have another question?
What's the next wave? What should we all be looking for, and what's the new frontier for developing synthesis?
I like to answer that. I don't know. But I'll tell you this. I feel, and I said this earlier, about the human voice. I'm still thinking about the human voice as being a controller of all of these other synthetic tools that we have, other tools that we have. And to note, Dr. Chowning and his wife, Maureen, they go around the world, and Maureen sings into a microphone, and when she sings certain notes, certain things happen in the background with FM and whatever else you're using, John, and it controls that particular parameter. And if you notice how many languages are in the world, that means how many different sounds are there. So I feel like this has been the most underutilized as far as synthesis input or parameter changer. And so I would love to see the human voice being a part of the interface that goes into manipulating the parameters of synthesizers, because I've seen it work, and it works very well.
We have time for one more question.
So what would you say, as teachers should be teaching? What are some of the new things you might want to have them introduce?
Just learning the tools. There's really cool things. People are taking two different samples and finding ways of marrying them, and there's all these hybrid things from sample merging, and really exciting technology there. There's physical model. There's a guy that's showing all these plugins of physical modeled instruments that sound so realistic, that are using sample attack transients and physical modeling merged together, and the plugin's 15 megabytes in size, and it's like better than 285,000 gigabyte, 50 billion sample saxophones you can buy samples for. So there's all sorts of expressivity coming with new synthesis technologies that are exciting. But for teaching, it's about learning the tools. Once you know what the tools are, then you can build a house that looks different than someone else's.
I want to see resynthesis and additive brought under a user interface that people actually can use.
It sounds like a Hammond organ.
A little more than 9 bars, though.
I want to see
I want more stops.
environmental plotting, where you can actually, over time, control what effects, what envelopes, what shapes, what harmonics will happen, time duration based, so that you could actually play with environmental changes as you're playing, and we're out of time.
We're out of time. We're at the Sound Synthesis Club, and this was the Art of Sound Design. Thank you very much.